Order this meeting of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos of October 4th and ask Ms. Woods to do a roll call.
Councilmember Sack?
Here.
Councilmember Hudas?
Here.
Councilmember Badami?
Here.
Vice Mayor Risto?
Here.
Mayor Rennie?
Here. And if I could ask you to roll our meeting decorum video, please.
The public is welcome to participate at town council meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meetings is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. At each meeting, the following expectations of civil conduct shall apply. 1. For the benefit of the entire community, the town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the council agenda. 2. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at council meetings. 3. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at town council meetings. 4. All public comments at the town council meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. 5. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the mayor may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the council exiting the chamber. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the council would return to the chamber and the mayor would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a council meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code Section 403. These expectations of conduct also apply to meetings of all town boards, committees, and commissions.
Okay, thank you. So first up will be our council and manager matters. If I could start with the vice mayor, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't go through everything I did, but it was kind of a busy couple weeks with a lot of fun events. I attended the State of the City, both in Campbell and Saratoga, which was a great opportunity to listen to the events and accomplishments of the past year in two of our nearest neighbors. It was also a great opportunity to connect with city council people from a variety of other cities and discuss the fact that we're all kind of facing some of the same issues. I look forward to actually resuming State of the Town next year. I was inspired by it. I attended the Fusion Academy 10-year anniversary celebration. Fusion is a school in Los Gatos that really has just made an amazing difference for a lot of families, including my two children. And it was incredible to realize they've been here for 10 years and celebrate that because they are a great contributor to our community and to our youth. I took a tour today of Live Oak Adult Daycare, which has been closed since the pandemic, and just getting a better understanding of what is successful at their other sites and what they might need to be able to move forward in Los Gatos. Last week, I attended the Police Department Academy. I wasn't able to commit to it for all of the Thursdays because of housing element, but council members were fortunate enough to be able to be invited to attend any of the sessions that we could make. And last week was about using the Oculus system and learning how the police department uses that as a tool for practicing de-escalation. It was really eye-opening and a really great opportunity to see what our officers do and how they engage with the community. So I encourage anyone who's not doing the academy this time to consider it the next time around. Really great opportunity there. I attended the Screen on the Green. Happy to have that annual family event back again. The mayor was kind enough to invite me also to the Youth Citizens of the Year Awards, and I'm sure he has something more to say about the remarkable young people in our community and how they were honored. And I attended the police department swearing in ceremony where we had several police officers promoted and new police officers sworn in. And, you know, just kind of on a fun note, the two emotional support service dogs also received their badges. So it was just really an inspiring and heartwarming and wonderful celebration for the community. And then on more of a council note, I attended the Senior Services Committee and also my engagement ad hoc meeting. And one of the things coming out of engagement is there's going to be an activity called First Fridays, where the first Friday of every month at the Palms restaurant downtown, so starting this Friday and the first Friday of each month, seniors, older adults, however you define it, technically 55 and up, from 4 o'clock till 5:30, there will be specials, and I think we're calling it sips and nibbles, but there will be beverages and appetizers there available. So come and join us for an hour and a half this Friday before you head into St. Mary's Country Fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. On September 27th, the Council Policy Committee met and discussed updating the town social media policy and the Town Council Code of Conduct policy. The full council will be discussing the recommendations later tonight as agenda items number 10 and 11. On October 3rd, I met with Tyler Taylor, the Executive Director of SASE. I learned a lot about Tyler and his dedicated mission to serving the needs of our seniors. I've also had numerous meetings with constituents regarding issues in town, and most notably the land use element of the 2040 general plan that will be discussed tonight as agenda item number 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Badami. Councilmember Sayak.
Thanks. The only issue to report is that the Cal Cities Peninsula Division had their annual more of a social matter, and that again, Mark Nogales, council member of South San Francisco, is now president of the South San Mateo and Santa Clara County Peninsula Division. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. I guess since the last council meeting, had a number of meetings of the Senior Services Committee. A few times the road mapping committee has met to really put some meat on the bones of the document that'll be produced, to begin to welcome the new members who are joining from the Community Health and Senior Services Commission, and to work in a little bit of intensity on a couple of the big goals. So one of them is the inviting facility for seniors and community members. And I'm happy to report a lot of good work is going into that. So we should have a lot to report in the next few weeks on all of that on the Senior Services Committee. We have really an incredibly engaged and smart set of people in town who are really working the senior services issue from a lot of different angles. And it's great that we're doing the social events as well. I think that's really important. I participated in the Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability Authority meeting, which is where the first responder communications are linked to each other through some pretty extensive funding and capability. And I wanted to report that the Senate Bill 1000, which was an attempt to turn back encryption of these radios, failed in the Senate. It will probably come up again, and we probably ought to engage with our police department and fire on where they stand on this particular issue. I too participated in the Community Police Academy. It was fantastic. And I really, in addition to the cool technologies, it was fantastic to see our police officers spending time doing this for the community and making a real connection with our residents who participate in this. Very, very important. I taught at the Emergency Communications Ham Cram on the 24th. And we got a few new members, a few new licensees, and we are going to be teaching that class again at the end of the CERT courses. So I think that finishes in early November. There'll be another chance. On the 25th, I attended the Los Gatos concert series, which goes back 75 years that they've been doing this. And they started again with a quarterly, it was a fantastic concert of a cellist and a pianist. And then that pretty much covers, there's just so many senior services committee on my calendar that probably 5 or 6 meetings in the last week.
Thank you, Councilmember Hudis. And for me, since our last council meeting on 9/21, I attended the 9 County Bay Area Air Quality Management District board meeting, BACMed board meeting. Nothing particularly of interest to report from that one. On 9/22, I was very honored to get to say some welcoming and congratulations remarks for the police department swearing in. I was very impressed and excited about actually what a great event it was. We had a couple new officers, one of which decided to start their policing career in Los Gatos. We had promotions all up and down the command staff, which was exciting to see, the opportunities for the officers to advance their careers. We also had promotions in our professional staff with some new promotional positions that the council created so that we could provide a better career ladder, making Los Gatos a better place to work and making it easier for us to hire and retain staff. So it was really exciting to see how many people that were getting honored for promotions or hiring and so forth. And on 9/24, as mentioned, I got to do presentation for the Youth Citizens of the Year. We honored 3 young people and I'm just amazed at all of the things they did to, help out their community in lots of different ways. 2 of them, it was recognized that their GPAs were, I think, 4.2, and the other one edged them out at a 4.5 GPA average. I was amazed that they can keep up their GPA averages while doing all of the things that they did. So that's very inspiring to see what some of our youth can do. The next day on 9/25, I met with PAC 556 and their parents, and there was another younger PAC that was there too, to talk about civic engagement and why I got involved in government and how I got to be in government. And it was interesting. I did a little intro and then mostly answered questions, but they asked all kinds of things about, how I got here. And, I tried to act like a good role model for them. So that was interesting also. 9/28, the West Valley mayors and managers met as usual as our monthly meeting. On 10/3 yesterday, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Legislative Committee met. I was vice chair. The chair was not there, so I had to chair the meeting. We went over things like how we did in the governor's budget. We did Bay Area Air Quality Management District did well in the budget, getting lots of dollars for various programs that we administer and grant programs that we administer. We didn't do so well on a lot of the bills that we sponsored. One of them got through, many others, I think one may have gotten vetoed by the governor. A few others didn't get to the governor's desk, so we didn't do as well there. One thing of note for us that was mentioned was SB 45. Our Parks and Public Works might want to look into that. It directs Cal Recycle to help with funding local jurisdictions' implementation of the organic waste reduction, basically diversion from the waste to organics. That's something that we've had to do, and this bill actually has Cal Recycle help provide some money. So there may be some opportunities for Los Gatos to get some money as a result of that bill through Cal Recycle's in our required efforts to divert organics from the waste stream. And there were several other climate related bills that passed that we talked about. So with that, I will go to manager matters.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Just two announcements for you this evening. First, staff will be at the farmers market on Sunday to talk to the community about our housing element. So please stop by and say hello. And then we are now recruiting for all of our boards and commission openings. We've got lots of great opportunities on almost every one of the town's committees. So please sign up. Applications can be found at the town clerk's website, and applications are due December 2nd. Thank you.
And maybe this is a good time to mention next council meeting, we're going to try to be in person. Staff is working on getting all the technical details for that worked out. So expect us to be in person next council meeting. And then next we move to our consent agenda, which consists of items 1 through 9. Would any member of council wish to pull an item from consent? Seeing none, would any, Councilmember Hudes, sorry.
I don't wish to pull, but I had a comment on one item. I don't know if this is the right time for that.
Let me ask the public if they have comments first, and then I'll come back to council for comments.
Thank you.
Would any member of the public wish to comment on items on the consent agenda, which are items 1 through 9? Seeing no hands, I'll close public comment on the consent agenda and come back to council for any comments they wish to make on the consent calendar. Go ahead, Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment for the public that item number 9 is an important item that that states the results of folks in town who collected signatures for a referendum, and the signatures, I understand, were successful, that roughly 2,200 signatures were required and about 3,000 were obtained, and that this item effectively suspends 2 elements of the general plan, the land use element and the community design element. And then I know we have other actions later this evening on that, but this item number 9 effectively say cancels, but it suspends those 2 items from going into effect. And if I'm not correct on that, town attorney, please correct me.
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion for the consent calendar or comments. Councilmember Badami.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the consent calendar consisting of items 1 through 9.
Vice Mayor.
I second the motion.
Okay, any other comments on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I will call a question. Vice Mayor Risto.
Aye.
Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Councilmember Sayak.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes. That looked like an aye, but we didn't.
It's an aye.
Yeah. And the mayor votes aye. So consent calendars, items 1 through 9 passes unanimously. which moves us to verbal communications. And this is an opportunity for the public to speak to us for 3 minutes on items that are not on our agenda. I saw Falake Phillips' hand go up just after I closed consent calendar. If you wanted to comment on consent calendar, I'll allow that also, or items that are not on the agenda. Let's go with Falake Phillips, please.
Can you hear me, everyone?
We can, go ahead.
Oh, awesome. So hello, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and everyone joining in tonight. Thank you for your time and for the opportunity to give my comments. I'd like to start by commending the town's council's bravery and leadership in continuing to explore sustainable ways to permeate our community, town processes, and policies through a Deja lens. When my family and I moved to Los Gatos in 2018, I was pregnant with our cutie pie and I had just migrated to the US from Nigeria some months before. Since then, I have met and heard from many wonderful people who truly want to see Los Gatos evolve into an inclusive town that brings with it a true sense of belonging and a sense of safety to all, including those who visit. Since then, I have also come across and heard of people who are not so wonderful. Both experiences are ongoing and give me the desire and drive to create or seek out opportunities to contribute to the joint effort ahead. The work of change, mindset renewal, and civic engagement is no easy task. And in sustaining the work of DEI, it is my hope to see that much attention is given to the aspect of capacity building. Personally, at this time, I would like to know what the town is planning or how it intends to support a United Against Hate Week, even if it weren't as tasking. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Phillips? Not seeing any. Thank you for your comments. Next up, Amy Davis.
Hello, good evening, Council. It's Amy, Executive Director of New Museum Los Gatos. And
looks like we're having a little trouble getting the right people promoted here. Let's start when Amy's time, if we could. And go ahead and start again, Ms. Davis. We had a little error there.
Okay, great. I'll start from the beginning. It's great to see all of you. Good evening, Council. It's Amy from New Museum Los Gatos, and I just really wanted to thank everyone, the staff and council and town manager, for your efforts to promote justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in Los Gatos by enlisting American Leadership Forum insights for the Discovery Report. It was really inspiring to see how you engaged community partners through meetings and with individuals and groups to gather critical community input on equity and inclusion efforts for the town. We really appreciate your efforts to lay a groundwork for sustainable equity in Los Gatos. One outcome of the Discovery Report, which we found particularly compelling, was the recommendation, instead of different groups working individually to address the issue of race equity, the town should provide infrastructure and funding for those groups to work together long term, and that their voices should be part of the design and implementation of the work to ensure authenticity of the process. I just wanted to go on record to raise an enthusiastic hand to help participate in this important movement building. We've just completed our own diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion action plan, and we're primed and ready to be an ally in this work. We organize exhibitions and public programs surrounding issues like intersectional identities, untold histories, and the social impact of climate change, just to name a few. We can be a platform for difficult but necessary conversations and have a track record of mobilizing community partners. So as you work through next steps with the action plan, your community partners can be leveraged as an incredible asset. We're ready to build community with you and want to know how we can help ensure that we effectively mobilize and that community voices continue to be a part of the equity conversation. So to have a vibrant and welcoming community where we're all safe and welcome, we need to leverage each other's strengths. I hope our organization and others like Falake's can be a resource as the town moves forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Any questions? I don't see any hands. I'll say the town is thankful to NUMU for working with us on these items. I think everybody is appreciative. I will go next to Jeff Suzuki.
Good evening, council members. I'd like to thank every one of you for all of the time and effort you've spent on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I remember 2 years ago when our town began having a real, genuine focus on these issues. And I can certainly say that we are in a far better position to really make a difference in people's lives. And as long as we have that will to move through controversies and have the courage to do the right thing, I am confident that the future is bright and is in our hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suzuki. I don't see any hands for questions. So again, thank you for those words. Next up, Scott Hoffman.
Hi, Scott Hoffman, representing San Jose Water Company. Talking about item 12, the vacation of New York Avenue. Just want to let you know that we've had property on New York Avenue for some time now, and we'd like to be part of that.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, could the speaker perhaps address the comments when we come to that item on the regular agenda?
That's fine.
Yeah, thank you for waiting. So we're trying to keep this to items not on the agenda right now. We'll call you back when we get to item 12.
Okay.
Would any other members of the public wish to address us on items not on the agenda? Seeing no more hands, we will get to our regular agenda. I'll close verbal communications for items not on our agenda and move to our regular agenda. Everybody's anxious to talk about it. So with that, we'll go to item number 10, which is to adopt an updated social media policy.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Holly Young, the analyst in the town manager's office. The item before you, item 10, is an updated town social media policy as recommended by the policy committee at its September 27th meeting. The current social media policy went into effect 7 years ago. And since that time, use of social media has increased, government best practices have evolved, and the Brown Act was amended to provide some social media guidance for public officials. The proposed updated policy in attachment 1 is based both on town and broader public sector best practices. Changes include the addition of definitions of key terms, clear guidelines for acceptable content for posting on town social media accounts, also clear guidelines for content that shall not be permitted and is subject to removal, and guidance for elected and appointed town officials, including information provided in Assembly Bill 992, which amends the Brown Act pertaining to public officials' use of social media. Some examples of other social media policies are included in the attachments for reference, and staff looks forward to the discussion and is available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Any questions before I go to the public? I'm not seeing any hands, so let me open public comment on this item. Would any members of the public wish to speak to us on item number 10? Don't see any hands being raised. So I will come back to council for questions, comments. Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Young, for doing this work to get us to where we need to be on social media policy. I can see that there was an extensive amount of work done on this. It's not just a few word changes from our previous policies. Thank you for doing it. I wanted to just ask one question. It actually relates to the next item on our agenda, but I thought that maybe this is the right time to ask it. So on page 7 of the policy, it talks about designating someone as a spokesperson, and it says unless an elected official has been designated to serve as a spokesperson, a town official should never represent themselves as a spokesperson for the entire legislative body of the town. But I understand in the policy 5C regarding the mayor on page 196, the mayor is being designated to speak. So are these compatible with each other? And I noticed that the word spokesperson has been stricken from the council policy, but it's being used here. I don't know if this is for the town attorney, but are these two things that we're considering tonight compatible, and is spokesperson?
Mr. Hudis, your motorboating is, I guess, what I would describe it. So it was a little difficult to understand you. Ms. Young, did you understand the question?
If not, I can probably paraphrase the question, and then Councilmember Hudis can let me know if I've captured the question accurately. Because he and I spoke about it today. So the social media policy currently says, don't represent yourself on social media as speaking for the town unless you've been designated as a spokesperson. Whereas the town's code of conduct talks about the role of the mayor, and it doesn't use the term spokesperson. It outlines the duties of the mayor with regard to communications without using the term spokesperson. And so I think Councilmember Hudis was concerned that one document uses the term and the other does not. And and so that's probably a topic for the council to decide. What I will say is that I don't believe the town's code of conduct is the only method of designating a town spokesperson. Like, for instance, a staff member could conceivably also be a spokesperson that's authorized to put posts on social media. But it's a topic for the council to discuss. And Councilmember Hudis, let me know if I conveyed that accurately.
Yeah, thank you. And let me know if you can hear me now. I had some of the settings reverted on my Zoom.
That's much better.
Okay, thank you. That's correct.
Ms. Young, did you have anything to add or in the answer to that question?
Yes, thank you. I think the town attorney summarized it pretty well, but spokesperson, I think, is used in the social media policy in a more general sense. And then I think in the council code of conduct, it's a little more specific. But if it's the will of the council, we can adjust the language used in the policy.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? I guess we are also looking for a motion to pass as proposed or modify. Councilmember Badami?
Yes, I would just like to make a comment that came up during the committee meeting. And we acknowledge that social media changes quickly. It evolves very quickly. So even though it's not written in as part of the new policy, we did propose to staff to have it internally reviewed every 2 years.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion? Councilmember Hudis?
I move to approve the social media policy as drafted.
Councilmember Badami?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Vice Mayor Risto?
I don't know if it would be an amendment. I'd like to add that town staff would review review this policy every 2 years, and if there are material changes, either bring it to the policy committee or back to the council in case we have to amend anything. I don't know if that's somehow included in here or how we would deal with that, or if we should just deal with that separately.
From what it sounded like, it's not part of the original motion. It was understood that it would happen, but if it's not an emotion, it's not necessarily required of staff to do it, but our understanding is staff will do it.
May I make a friendly amendment?
Let's ask the maker of the motion, which was Councilmember Hudes.
Yes, I was going to invite that. So
Councilmember,
for staff to review every 2 years and bring forward if there are material changes.
and the seconder, Councilmember Badami, is that okay with you?
It's okay. We did bring it up during the meeting, but per the town attorney, it wasn't necessary to have it codified, but I'm happy to go along with it because that was our intent.
Yeah, if it's included in the motion, it will be reflected in the minutes. And so it probably does make sense to amend the motion.
Okay. Thank you.
And maybe that's the appropriate place to have it in the motion versus in the document itself. So sounds like a good motion to me. So we have a modified motion. Any further comment? I will call the question then on this motion. Vice Mayor Risto.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes.
Aye.
Councilmember Sayak.
Aye.
Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
And the vote, mayor votes aye, so passes unanimously. And we move on to item number 11, which is to adopt town council code of conduct policy recommended changes.
Okay, this is Gabrielle Whelan, town attorney, and I can speak to this item. This agenda item is a product of the council's retreat, at which the council spoke about the existing code of conduct policy and the need to reconcile two different sections that we're talking about, representations made by council members on behalf of the town. The first issue that came up was the role of the mayor as spokesperson for the town council. And staff's takeaway from the retreat was that the council landed on the mayor being a spokesperson for the town council with regard to decisions that have been made by a majority of the council, representing the council with the media and representing the council at ceremonial occasions. And then the second issue that came up at the retreat was the ability of council members to express opinions and explain individual votes that were taken. And so the code of conduct has been amended to address the circumstances under which council members can do those two things. And I'm available to answer any questions if the council has any.
Okay, any questions before I go to the public? I don't see any hands. I will open verbal communication from the public for item number 11. Would any members of the public who wish to speak to us on this item, please raise their virtual hand. Don't see any hands going up, so I will close verbal communication and come back to council. I did want to make a comment myself here. I'll start with that since nobody else's hands are up. In section 11, where it talks about what you can talk about on items before they come to council, opinions that you can give, and so forth. There, in my opinion, there's a very significant change. I'm not necessarily saying we don't want to do it, but I want to make sure everybody understands the significance of the change. It looks to me, from a legal perspective, I believe the town attorney would tell us we cannot give opinions and there must be due process on quasi-judicial decisions. So that's the minimum at which we need to be very, very careful about what kinds of opinions we might give. What was in the policy before said basically all issues and projects, not just the quasi-judicial we will give due process and not show an opinion on something until we've gone to a council meeting. We know we've heard, all the written testimony, and we've heard from everybody. So to me, that's a really big change. The council members before us had the wisdom to put that in there. And as long as I've been on council, and I can remember, council member Spector was really good at not giving an opinion on something until all the due process had gone through. And to me, it makes sense because you've got members of our public, our residents, that are expecting to be able to come to a council member and you listen to their inputs. If you already have council members out there on non-quasi-judicial items talking about their opinion about something, those residents may feel like they're not being listened to, that they've already made up their minds. So there is some logic in my mind to the way the policy used to be. And I just want to make sure if we change it, the council members are very aware of the significance of the change. Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, thank you. And I recognize the change that's being proposed, but I would suggest that the previous policy was not followed, that frequently someone who was a candidate for office, for instance, would express an opinion like, we will need to have a parcel tax or something like that before it went through a process. And unless we created a carve out for candidates, which would then make those non-candidates on a different footing, I think that distinction was just never followed. So I think the change is a good one. This is an area that we may need to come back to and test the changes that have been made. For instance, the change with regard to the scope of the mayor's spokesperson responsibilities, which we don't call spokesperson here, but essentially it is something that's a little different from other municipalities. As I checked around, there were actually, in some cases, that was limited to issues of emergency or urgency items. So I think what is here is okay, and I think it addresses that fundamental issue of the previous language that we just didn't follow in many cases.
Councilmember Saab.
Thank you, Mayor, for bringing this up. And for those that are just following, we had this great discussion at our retreat on this code of conduct. And I do agree with Councilmember Hudes that I think that this should be revisited as we test it out. I, for one, don't want a carve out in any of our governing policies for candidates and for campaigns. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that should be a completely separate area that, frankly, our staff don't even touch. So I don't know how to create policy, and this is where I look to the town attorney for future council members who just abide by what is good governance, to save judgment and deference to what you may be hearing in the future. I think candidates, it's oftentimes easier to say what you think and what you'll do, but then when you're actually in that governing seat and realize the nuances and complexities, it changes a bit. But I think as Councilmember Hudes, this is one that we should look at. This is one that should be tested. And frankly, this is one where the new council should constantly have conversations about, because I think it's hard to document in one policy what a future council would like its own internal decorum policy should be, and how you would like your future town governance to govern as a united front. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Risto.
Thank you. I do think we'll have to revisit it. I think the mayor made some really good points. I mean, I know that as somebody only elected 2 years ago, I ran on certain values and priorities, but I always view every single issue that comes before the council as something where I know where all the information stacks up against what my values are and where I think the community should go. But there's always room to hear more information from another council member, from a staff member, from another member of the community. And I would hate to get into a situation where people are stating in advance how they might vote on something. Just because something hasn't always been followed doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a rule. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to have rules that you can't enforce, but I also think that having a policy that encourages us to be open-minded and to take in information is important. So, I unfortunately did not watch the policy committee meeting. I don't know what details were discussed there, but I am a little hesitant to change this part of the policy. I'm not totally opposed to it, and if it does change, I hope that we will revisit it regularly to see what, if any, issues have come up or how it's working out for future councils.
Okay, thank you. I am looking for a motion on this item. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the changes, I guess? Councilmember Badami?
I move to adopt the updated Town Council Code of Conduct policy as recommended by the Policy Committee. And I would think that if we want to review this or amend this at a later date, that would be up to a future council body that might not be the same council body that we have here today.
Councilmember Hudes?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, and I will go ahead and support the motion. As kind of what Vice Mayor Risto said, I'm a little hesitant of sort of opening up the Wild West on this. Even if it wasn't followed all the time, it kept us pretty tight. By removing it, it could go way astray. So I'm willing to support it because I'm always willing to try new things and see if it makes things better, particularly if we are going to keep an eye on it and review it in the future. So for that reason, I will support the motion. Any other comments? I will call the question. Councilmember Hudes?
Aye.
Councilmember Sayak?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Risto?
Aye.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye, so this item passes unanimously. And we move on to item number 12, which is adopt a resolution granting 4 New York Avenue to the Los Gatos Saratoga Union High School District, so forth. I'll turn this over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Council. So it's been the town's practice when we discuss the disposition of properties to either try and seek a public benefit or a public purpose for the disposition, or to just outright monetize the property for other financial considerations, or a hybrid of both. Back in 2018, the council redirected staff to remain engaged with the high school to see if we could find a reasonable disposition for, at the time, what was a conversation only about 4 New York Avenue, otherwise known as the venue. Over the years, the two parties have worked to understand better what the objective was for each party. And as the discussions ensued over the course of the years, not only was the venue a topic of discussion, but as the staff report indicates, also were some of the residual streets that still reside within the high school campus. Back in 2001, the parties started getting closer to what they thought reasonable objectives and goals were to try and put together a transaction. And you can see that those really started to revolve around really enhancing traffic management in the high school area. And then were there other public benefit opportunities that could result from some type of a property transaction. Back in 2022, of February of 2022, you'll see that the high school finally provided a formal proposal to the town council stipulating that they were willing to commit to certain objectives that the council had communicated to them. And once again, those objectives were really enhancing collaboration around traffic management, and then also making sure that the venue still provided public benefit to the community through some form of programming. You can see in the staff report and in what we're referring to as the grant agreement that these commitments really revolve around several areas in your staff report. They're areas A through H. One of the initial areas is convening a working group to address parking and traffic issues. The next item B is expanding the existing parking and improve ingress egress for student drop-off at the pinch point of New York Avenue and Pleasant Street. Item C is allowing future ingress and egress from the property at the Los Gatos Lodge in the event that becomes feasible. D is retaining KCAT on the property known as the venue with multi-generational programming for community benefit. E is continuing LGS Rec as a community resource with the community continuing to have appropriate access to the property. F, working toward amending the district's master plan to show access at the property line shared with the property currently occupied by Los Gatos Lodge. G, developing design for bicycle pedestrian access at the property line shared with the property currently occupied by the Los Gatos Lodge. And then finally, H, ensuring that we cooperate to the extent we need to ensure that any public utility easement, any emergency vehicle access, and all the easements that we still need to maintain remain in place at the consummation of the vacation of the streets. You will see that this evening's item is really only addressing for New York Avenue and the venue. In discussions with the utilities and with others, it became apparent that we need a little more time to do the vacation aspect for New York Avenue and also for Chicago Avenue. And so once we're able to ensure that all the utilities feel comfortable with the vacation moving forward and we have the appropriate legal documentation in place, we will come back for that aspect of the transaction. So as you can see from the staff report, we are recommending that we move forward with the agreement the two parties have agreed to in principle and documenting it through the resolution and the grant agreement this evening. With that, we're available for any questions.
Any questions before I open it up to public comment? Councilmember Sack?
I'm sorry, Mr. Andrews, you may have said it, but there is something in our desk item from, and I believe I see Mr. Scott Hoffman to speak to it. Could you just clarify the issue with the easement?
So once again, we kind of bifurcated the transaction. So this evening it's for New York Avenue, which is the physical property known as the venue, and then the property that extends down the western side of the campus. However, when we started the conversation, we included the utilities because we were anticipating moving forward with the street vacation part at the same period as the venue property. It became obvious that we needed more time. The director of public works and working with the town engineer and others, it just became obvious, and consultation with the town attorney. So those items aren't here this evening. I think Mr. Hoffman, I don't want to speak for him, but his letter basically lets the council know that they're watching the transaction and they hope that their concerns are heard. And I can assure you from a staff perspective, they will be involved in the conversation and their concerns will end up being illustrated in whatever legal documents come out of this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And if I could just ask a little clarification. So their concerns are more around the portion that we're not working on tonight, or were there concerns around tonight's portion?
Once again, I don't want to speak for Mr. Hoffman, but we did have emails today just making sure that San Jose Water knew that tonight was strictly going to discuss the venue. But I think they want to take the opportunity to make sure that the council is aware that, you know, they're going to be very concerned about how the easements are handled in the vacation part of the transaction, which will come to council at a later date.
All right, thank you. So let me go to public comment. Would any members of the public wish to comment on this? Mr. Hoffman started before and he'd like to start again. So let's go with Scott Hoffman, please.
Thank you. My apologies for speaking out of turn. I didn't quite understand when to speak. That was very informative, Aaron, and I appreciate your consideration. And we just wanted to make sure that we can retain the same rights we've had for a long time not just to access our property, but also the utilities in the streets. And we'd like to just participate in that vacation and make sure that the easements reserved will be sufficient for our current use and for future use. We have 3 pipelines in that street in New York Avenue, and eventually they'll need to be replaced, and we need room for that, and it can get quite congested. So hopefully in the end that the public service easements are just as wide as the street right away is today, and I have confidence that will be the case. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. I don't see any questions from council for you. So thank you for making sure that we get it right. Please stay engaged until we get that part of the street vacations done. Next up, Lee Fago.
I'm speaking tonight as a 25+ year resident of the town of Los Gatos, and who had volunteered for almost 15 years on the school board, the venue, or the Place for Teens, which is the nonprofit organization that we had. And originally the facility was called the Outhouse, the name the students chose to keep adults less interested in going there. And then later the venue, as the students later wanted to have a more inviting name for the facility. I want to thank the town and the high school district for working through this challenge to optimize the property, built with initially community donations, a lot of support townwide to build the facility. People donated time, money, and resources to build that facility, to landscape it, to make it an inviting environment for our youth and a safe place for kids to hang out after school and on weekends. I'm glad to see that this is finally being resolved. It's taken a heck of a long time, but thank you for doing it. Truly appreciate it. And hopefully with the vision that's in place for the facility going forward, it will still be an appealing place for teens to come, to learn, to be safe. And working with KCAT and the high school district, it's going to be the right environment again. So thank you all. I'm applauding you. Pretend you can hear me applauding and saying thank you going forward.
Mr. Fago, I have a question for you from Councilmember Hudes.
Not so much a question as a comment. And I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Fago, and all of the residents who 25 years ago had the foresight to think about a facility that would serve our students. And I know there were monetary contributions and sweat equity, and a lot of people in the community who were very involved in it. And it has taken a different turn, but I just want to thank you. I remember reading about it all that time ago, and it's a big deal for our community. And I want to thank you and all the folks who have been involved in it for so many years.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. It was a real community-wide effort, and a lot of folks were engaged. And I was able to come on board after many of the pioneers who had worked to get those resources in place and the building underway. So a great effort by many folks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fago, and thank you for your kind words about us finally managing to pull this off.
It was
would anybody else wish to speak to us on item number 12? I don't see any, so I'll close public comment, come back to council for more questions, comments, and a motion. Vice Mayor Risto.
Thank you. I don't have any questions because I think the public wasn't there, but in closed session, we discussed a lot of things. And I think the bullet points, A through H, show that not only have we found a good use for this building and a great solution for both the town and the school, but going forward, we have a lot of cooperation between us to address traffic and access issues. And I think this will be a huge win across the board, not just for the facility, but for the community and for the students. I'm ready to make a motion unless Councilmember Sayak has some comments.
Go ahead. Looks like she says, go ahead.
Okay, then I will quite happily. Good things sometimes take time. I will recommend, or I'll make the motion that we adopt the resolution in attachment 1, granting 4 New York Avenue to the Los Gatos Saratoga Union High School District, and authorize the town manager to negotiate and execute 4 New York Avenue grant agreement in substantially the form presented, and all documents needed to complete the transaction in a form acceptable to our town attorney. Oh.
Mr. Andrews?
And my apologies, but earlier in the day, the town clerk and the town attorney advised me that in my haste, I had made 1 or 2 small errors on the resolution. The town attorney is very comfortable with me just reading into the record what the changes should be, but
please do.
In the 6th whereas, the 2nd page of the resolution where we had the term set forth in Exhibit A, that should really read described in its proposal, meaning the district. And then in the 7th whereas, where it said as Exhibit B, that should really just read attached to the staff report accompanying the resolution. And so with those read into the record, I believe the town attorney is comfortable with the motion moving forward.
And maker of the motion, are those changes acceptable to you?
Very much so. Thank you.
All right. Do I have a second? Councilmember Sayak?
Happily second, and just reiterate what the vice mayor had said and give special thanks to Assistant Town Manager for carrying this through to the finish line. This has been under discussion since before I came onto council, so it'll be close to 8 years, and appreciative of the efforts of the previous council, the current council, and our town staff, as well as the school staff that have been very willing to engage and make sure that the community benefits still remain, even though that this is going to the school. So thanks again.
Mr. Andrews, your hand is still up. Did you have some more to add? No. Okay. All right. So I have a motion and a second, and I'll just say this feels very satisfying to me because we've been working on this for a long time, and we were really hung up on, we should get some dollars for this. We should get some value from giving away property owned by the town. That, there was definitely some of that hang up. But if you look at the A through H, we didn't get dollars, but we may have gotten, I think we got more value out of working together on some of these common problems that the town is trying to solve, that's also related to the high school. And so by getting their willingness to work with us on all of those items, I think is more value than if we had gotten some dollars that the high school would have had to come up from somewhere and so forth. So this seems like a really good win-win after all of these years of working on this. Any further comments? If not, I will call the question. Councilmember Sayak.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudis.
Aye.
Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Risto.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So this item passes unanimously. And we move on to item 13. Which is to adopt a final lease agreement with Senelux.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Council. You recall that back in late June, we came before you with an agreement with Senelux Theaters Company, LLC for their operation and program management of the Los Gatos Theater that had been donated to the town. Back when we brought that agreement, the recommendation stated that if there was anything that appeared to be a material change based on the observations of the town attorney, that we would bring it back to you. So that is what we're doing this evening. There is one element that is materially different from the agreement you saw back in late June, which is the addition of a concept referred to as minimum profitability. From staff's perspective, in discussions with the operator, we feel that it is abundantly important to create a sense of stability. And one of the ways we create a sense of stability is by making sure that the operator has some assurance that they're not necessarily going to be running in the red year after year after year, and that instead of this being part of their portfolio with some type of minimum profitability, it actually ends up being a drain on their organization. So as we discussed it between ourselves and our attorney and their attorney, and looking at pro forma statements using real data prior to 2019 from the theater operations, and also looking at the insights from Cinelex, because they run many theaters throughout the Santa Clara region, we came up with what is defined as 100,000 as the minimum profitability, which in the event that doesn't occur, all this term does is it means that the parties will start discussing again the current monetary elements of the contract, which there are two of those. One is rent. Rent starts to escalate up over a 2-year period. And the other one is our percentage of gross sales. And so in the event that the town is basically benefiting more than the provider, and the provider feels that they're no longer incentivized to want to run the theater operations, it means the two parties will come together and discuss the terms again. That being said, this is an area that is different from what you saw, and so we are available for questions for the council to decide if this is an element of the contract you're willing to move forward with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Andrews. Would any member of the public wish to address us on this item? Please raise your virtual hand. Don't see any hands being raised, so I'll close public comment for item number 13 and come back to council for questions, comments, motion. Councilmember Hudes.
Thanks. I just wondered whether this was an item that was causing extra time to be taken, and if not, when we can expect to watch movies in the Cinelex.
Thank you, council member, and you're not alone. I can't tell you how many times I get stopped on the street and asked that question. So if this is approved tonight, this is the final contractual area of the contract that we needed to basically hand over keys to the Cinelex organization and their chief officer, Paul Gunsky. So I actually have a meeting scheduled for Thursday in the hopes that this conversation would conclude this evening. But if it doesn't, we'll make sure that we do everything we can to get that theater open and come to a contractual arrangement that the council and that the Cinelex organization is comfortable with. As I mentioned, staff is comfortable with this outcome based on a review of pro formas and other areas, but it is a council determination. And if you were to do it tonight, we want to have the theater open. By we, I mean Cinelex. They want to have it open in time for the holiday season. Typically August and September and a little bit of October, I understand from speaking with them, is a slow time, but they would very much like to be open for the start of the holiday season.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion? Vice Mayor Risto?
Thank you. I mean, first of all, I think these changes make a lot of sense. Hopefully, under the best circumstances, we won't have to come back and revisit it, but it makes sense that we want our operator to not be running in the red and for our theater to be profitable. But second of all, I want to see a movie there really soon, because that's where I go for my movies. So it's been a long time. So I'll make the motion to adopt the final lease agreement of Cinelex Theater Company, LLC for the operation and program management of the Los Gatos Theater.
Councilmember Hudes?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further comments from council members? Not seeing any hands. I will call the question. Councilmember Hudes?
Aye.
Councilmember Sayak?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Risto?
Aye.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye, passes unanimously. And we move on to item number 14, which is to approve a resolution to confirm suspension of the 2040 general plan land use and community design elements.
This is Gabrielle Whelan, town attorney, and I can speak to this item. The elections code provides that once sufficient signatures have been certified by the registrar of voters, the referended elements are suspended. And so in the absence of having the 2040 land use and community design elements in place, staff wanted to have confirmation of what applies in the interim. And so staff's proposal is that the 2020 general plan land use and community design elements will govern during this period of suspension. And so that is the agenda item that's before the council tonight, is adoption of that resolution to make that clear. And then there is a discussion in the staff report of next steps. That is not on the agenda for action tonight. But if the council has questions about next steps, staff is available to answer them. In a nutshell, the town's options going forward are to place the referendum on a special election, which would occur in 2023, have the referendum on the regular municipal election, which would be November of 2024, or to rescind its approval of the 2040 land use and community design elements and adopt amended elements that contain different densities, et cetera. So those are the three options before the council. And I know that our community development director is available, and I'm available if the council has questions.
Councilmember Sack, questions before we go to the public?
Yes, my only question to the town attorney is the sequencing. I understand they're two separate, but is there a certain amount of time? When will we next see this?
And that's really at the council's discretion. The only deadlines, there's one, timing thing to keep into consideration, and that's the town council having its housing element reviewed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. And I understand from discussions with the community development director that HCD will be comfortable with the town proposing an implementation plan that says when the town will have a general plan that conforms with the housing element. And so the town's submission of its housing element is not a deadline at this point in time. So the deadlines would be the dates by which the town needs to let the county registrar of voters know that it wants to have a special election, or the date by which the town needs to let the registrar of voters know that it wants to have the election in November of 2024. And I know that the town clerk is also available this evening. And I understand that there are conceivably 4 special election dates that are available in 2023. And so we'd want to have a more detailed discussion with the council at a future date.
Vice Mayor Risto?
Thank you. I realize that what's before us tonight, I mean, we can't operate in a vacuum, so we should move forward and probably have to revert to the 2020 since those other elements are suspended. But kind of, if it goes to an election and the referendum fails, in the meantime, we'll have to do a bunch of amendments to the general plan elements to allow our housing element to move forward. But then if the referendum fails, does that automatically reinstate our 2040 elements that were suspended?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sack, more questions?
Yeah, one more. I guess I think I understand, but if town staff could articulate it again to those that are watching, what happens if we don't take action, and why we have to revert back to the 2020? Because in many ways, if it's suspended, can't we just suspend everything?
I'll start. So staff is going to continue to get applications for planning projects. And so staff needs to know, what standards to apply during this period of suspension. That doesn't look like it answered your question.
So I think that maybe the question that she's alluding to is, do we have, tonight we're suggesting, well, it's sort of automatically suspending two elements that are referendum, and we're bringing two elements forward. Could we take an action to just suspend all of the 2040 general plan tonight?
I don't believe the item was listed on the agenda that way. Let me check the agenda description.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor, I would advise that's a whole separate policy question for the town council. I think tonight it's really, how do you want to enable the ability for the town to continue to issue building permits and subdivision maps? We need to have a land use element in order to keep the permitting process operating. If we don't have a land use element, then essentially we can't issue permits. So
and so we as council really only have one choice, right? There isn't a second choice anywhere, is there?
Unless you want to direct us to create tailored designations, and that would involve a whole new process with our planning commission and the community, et cetera. So at this point, we felt that it was important to provide essentially a stopgap, since the referendum was silent on the implications of it moving forward. So we felt it was critical that we had some policy guidance, so that way our applications could continue to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sack, more questions.
Just I guess question / clarification then. So then the referendum basically asked a suspension of the 2 chapters, which is before us, but did not designate what it would be suspended, what would be its replacement. And so the town, because we don't want to stop and have every single resident at a standstill right now, we are doing it this stopgap, and this is the identified stopgap that staff recommends that can enable us to continue to the business of the town while the next step is to figure out how to move forward. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thanks.
Okay. Yep, I'm not muted. Let me open this up to public comment. Would any members of the public wish to comment on this item? Please raise your virtual hand. Jeff Suzuki, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Suzuki, president of the Los Gatos Anti-Racism Coalition. As we all know, there hasn't been a shortage of accusations that have been levied against the town council, planning commission, and the town staff. People have accused the town of sidestepping the democratic process and somehow crafting the general plan behind closed doors, that somehow the general plan doesn't represent the true voice of Los Gatos. I understand that the suspension will move forward, but to anyone who happens to be listening to this comment or has either thought that or parroted that it doesn't represent voices in Los Gatos, I want you to take a moment to understand that this is a frankly insulting perspective. I moved here when I was 10 years old. I grew up here. I remember when the town council held community conversations in 2020, when the town council held an affordable housing workshop and a community culture workshop because there was widespread community support. And during the community culture workshop, there was almost universal agreement among the resident attendees that we needed more affordable housing now. I remember those years of GPAC meetings where countless people lent their voices and dedicated their evenings to create a truly progressive general plan. And I can say that staff has been more than accommodating in ensuring that every voice was heard. And to say that all of those voices don't at all represent Los Gatos just because some signatures were gathered, very aggressively by petitioners, if I may add, is absurd. I also want to take a moment to note that it's very unfair to accuse the town council of approving the general plan and implying that it somehow didn't listen to its residents. Opponents of the general plan have opportunistically insulted staff for alleged bias here, but let's be very clear. The general plan was effectively drafted by its residents. Residents like me, residents like Ali Miano. The town listened to people who were concerned about a housing crisis that is destroying the people in my generation, that is displacing the elderly, that is making this town increasingly exclusive. To me, the fact that we made our voices heard is proof that the democratic process works. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suzuki. Good summary. Any questions? I don't see any questions from council. I will move on to Ali Miano.
Good evening, and thank you for taking my comment. I speak to you as a member of the Los Gatos Anti-Racism Coalition. Although I'm a member of the Town Complete Streets and Transportation Commission, tonight I focus my attention on fair and affordable housing and urge you to support the current proposed 2040 General Plan's housing element. As a resident of Los Gatos since 1965, I've seen our town become increasingly unaffordable. Homes built here today could house 4 families, but instead are destined only for a family of 4, driving up prices for everyone and sending even one of my high school classmates into an abandoned building in town as a last resort. The general plan seeks to make change for the better by speaking to affordable housing, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some who speak tonight may say that in order to maintain Los Gatos' quote unquote charm, we need to maintain its state as a gentrified protectorate of the wealthy. But I remember the Los Gatos of the 60s when there was affordable housing for a much larger swath. We had homeowners who were single moms, teachers, and police officers. And serving that economically diverse community, we had 5 and dime stores and mom and pop shops, where today we have abandoned storefronts. Today, the middle class, working class, and poor are expected to pack their bags and commute from the South Valley, Central Valley, Santa Cruz County, causing incredible traffic and pollution because the folks who trim our nails or our lawns can't afford to live here. So it's high time we reverse the post-World War II recipe of a gentrified, unaffordable suburbia. With that mentality, everyone loses. When we, the privileged, fail to do the democratic thing and make sure that everyone in our society has a safe, affordable home, we all suffer. We lose out on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And not only do we suffer traffic and pollution, but our schools produce, among the good kids, youth who disrespect diverse groups, deface our schools and community centers with hate-filled graffiti, and physically or verbally assault members of the AAPI community, among others. Indeed, if we keep our heads in the sand and fail to plan properly for affordable housing, the disrespect, racial incidents, traffic, pollution, and homelessness will only increase. You, as our elected officials, are supposed to do something. You are not elected to sit on your hands and revert to an old plan. That's why we need you to support the 2040 General Plan. While there is a Not in My Backyard or NIMBY contingent in town, they do not represent everyone. They don't appear to believe in democracy, and I wonder if they even would provide the homeless with a tent, let alone affordable housing. Let's evolve from the 1960s and not revert to the 1860s. Let's accept everyone, rich, middle class, working class, and poor, Black, Brown, Indigenous, AAPI, and white, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miano. Any questions for the speaker? I don't see any hands raised from council, so thank you for your summary and comments. Anybody else wish to speak to us on this item? Don't see any more hands being raised, so I will close public comment for item 14 and come back to council for a motion or comments. Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. So it's clear tonight that this is a stopgap measure. It's administrative in nature. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion so that we can get building permits processed in the meantime to adopt a resolution to confirm suspension of the 2040 General Plan land use and community design elements, and provide that the 2020 General Plan land use and community design elements govern during the period of suspension.
Thank you. I have a motion. Would anybody like to second? Councilmember Hudes?
I'll second the motion. I have a question for town staff. I don't know if this is the appropriate time.
Sure, go ahead.
As I'm reading the 2020 general plan elements that are now going to be in place if this motion passes, it seems that they're not sufficient to achieve the proposed land use changes that are in the draft of the housing element, which is sort of evolved at the same time. What will the process be for providing the state with a housing element that is consistent with the rest of the general plan?
Director Paulson, I
Thank you,
think that's
Councilmember.
yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Hudes. As Attorney Whalen mentioned before, staff is going to be including an implementation program, actually probably 2 implementation programs in the housing element, expressing that we will be doing general plan amendments so that the 2020 general plan will be amended to ensure that we can accommodate our RENA plus the buffer for the next cycle. And so that's the intent at this point.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up, if I may.
Go ahead.
Having read the 2020 general plan and the elements in there, I'm not so sure that they are really stopgap. As I read them, I think they reflect a great deal of what the community and my constituents and the constituents of the town would like to see, with the exception of the changes that are required by the state in the area of fire and in the area of housing that includes a large number of affordable housing units be allowed to be built. So I'm assuming that when you talk about general plan amendments, it could be based on the texts of the 2020 or the text of the 2040, and that is yet to be determined. Is that right?
That's correct. Those general plan amendments would come forward at a future date, Councilmember Hudes, and those would be considered by the Planning Commission and the Town Council.
Okay. And then one more follow-up, if I may, on the housing element, since that will be, there'll be an implementation plan in there to be aligned with the action that we're taking tonight. Will the council review the housing element before it is submitted to HCD, and will it be recirculated to the public after these changes, including the implementation plan that was mentioned?
Thank you, Councilmember Hudes. As you're aware, and council is aware, and the public, the comment period for the new 30-day requirement ended. We are going through those comments and preparing modifications for the preliminary review by HCD. We received guidance from HCD that prior to going through that formal adoption process through Planning Commission and Council, that we get this first draft to them for their initial preliminary review. And so that would not be coming back to council at this point. Following their review and receiving comments, we are anticipating bringing that back at least once, if not twice, prior to resubmitting the next version of the housing element.
So I would just comment, I support the motion, obviously. However, I am really surprised that the council won't see the housing element before it's being submitted, because what we're saying is to our residents, give us your comments. We'll make those changes, but we're not going to show it to the council again before we submit. That just does not make sense to me. I think we need to listen to our residents, and we've gotten off track when we haven't done that.
Let me first, before we continue discussion, So I have a motion and a second, and I have closed public comments. But it is the mayor's discretion to open public comment again if he or she so desires. We haven't had that many people speaking, and I like to err on the side of making sure our public can get their comments in. So I'd like to open public comment again to allow Marcia Jensen to speak. I'd like to open public comment again to allow Marcia Jensen to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone, and it's good to see you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk on this. I've made a policy of trying to not speak on things unless I thought they were very important to the town and something that I'd spent a lot of time working on. And one of the things I spent a lot of time working on is the general plan for 2020 and 2040, and also the housing element in its last iteration. And the first comment I'd make is that I must say that I don't understand, much like Councilwoman Sayak's question, why a ballot initiative that has qualified based on the signatures would have any effect on an approved general plan. We have ballot propositions in California. We have many pending right now. So would we suddenly start gambling because there are 26 propositions, 26 and 27 on the ballot? Would we, take actions on dialysis because there's a proposition on that? I don't understand why a qualification of a ballot measure would cause us to take action. I understand that the town wants to have something in place. It does. It has an approved 2040 general plan. And the town worked hard on it. You all council members worked hard on it. We have something that is in place. We can go forward with that plan and with our new housing element in place. If the voters then decide to reject that, then that's the will of the voters. But no one has voted on this yet. I have to respectfully disagree with Councilmember Hudis that the registrar of voters certifying that the number of signatures has qualified the measure for the ballot would suddenly suspend those elements that we have in mind. I don't think that's true. I will defer to the town attorney, but I do believe that we have an approved plan. We do need to meet the state requirements. We have, as Mr. Suzuki said earlier, worked with the town and with the community in reaching those goals. We have members of the downtown community who want this to go forward. I just don't understand why the town would suspend years of work in anticipation of something that may or may not happen. So I urge you to put this on the ballot when appropriate, but don't act as though it's been passed. Go forward with your plans for the housing element. Do what you need to do. And Mayor Rennie, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it. And good night.
Attorney Whelan, if you're planning to answer the question, our usual procedure is to finish taking public comment before if we decide to answer questions. So I will check to see if anybody else wishes to speak that hasn't already spoke on this item before I close public comment for the second time. Not seeing any new hands raised. Now I'll close public comment and I'll allow the town attorney to address questions.
And yes, so I wanted to speak to the question raised by the last speaker. What the town staff is relying on with this recommendation is Elections Code Section 9237. And it's unique to referendums. And it does provide that if a referendum has received sufficient signatures, the effective date of the legislation that's being challenged is suspended. And so it's a feature of the elections code rather than an option for the town council.
Thank you. And that's consistent with what you've told us before on this item. So I will come back to council members. I had a couple hands up before I took public comment again. Any more questions, thoughts from council members? Councilmember Sayak?
Thank you, Mayor. I realize there's a motion on the floor, but I do have a question. I think it's related, so please, staff, please tell me if it's not. The question was specific to the housing element and the public comment period. So if the staff could just clarify, public comments that have been received, staff will respond to those, correct?
Thank you, Councilmember Sayak. Yes, those will be responded to either via potential modifications and or clarification as to why a specific matter may or may not have been addressed.
And if I could, Mr. Mayor, so staff will respond to the commenter or make those changes with the housing element, or once the housing element review has been completed, that's done.
Thank you. So it's similar to what we typically do for an environmental impact report, the response to comments. Then we create a document that basically has the comment and then has a response as to how it's being addressed one way or the other. And so that's how we plan to handle this portion of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Risto?
Thank you. I guess going back to that point, I mean, in terms of the process where the housing element draft is put together, it goes out for public comment, then it goes to HCD for review, which I think we know from every single municipality, it's not going to pass the first time. My understanding is that that is a process laid out by HCD to allow us to complete it. That is not, that HCD is saying this shouldn't go to the Planning Commission and the Town Council and then to them the first time around. That it goes to them and then it goes back for changes and then it goes through the voting bodies. Is that correct?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, so we've received direction, as mentioned before, that this preliminary review, this first review by HCD, that we should be getting that to them obviously as soon as we can, and that they don't recommend going to the approval bodies for adoption prior to that submittal.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hudis.
Thank you. I guess what I was reacting to was not a request for the housing element to come for approval, but for review prior to it going to HCD. Assuming that staff makes some responses, or as in CEQA and EIRs, occasionally makes changes. I assume that the housing element and the Housing Element Advisory Board made some changes to the specific sites since the council last reviewed that on June 7th. So that is why my comment is that I think it's surprising that staff would submit this to the state without the council seeing the full package. Not for final approval, but for review prior to being submitted. It again seems to me bypassing the council, as happened with the general plan, when the council provided direction on the general plan, and then the staff worked directly with the general plan advisory committee, and all of a sudden, what went from meeting the state RENA requirements plus a buffer, roughly 2,200 units, all of a sudden jumped up to 4,000 units because there was no review by council. So those are the reasons why I think it's important. Now, I think we're a little bit off topic.
Yes, we're definitely off topic. Please wrap up.
I'm done.
All right, thank you. So let me go back to hopefully, please don't go on that topic anymore. Housing elements really not in this agenda item. Vice Mayor?
No, I was only going to ask town staff because a comment was made after the town council approved the housing element sites. Sitting on the Housing Element Advisory Board, I don't think anything was changed about those sites. So I just wanted to see that. It seemed like a comment was made that other things happened.
Yeah, again, I think we're way off our
Okay, thank you.
item. So if you have questions about those, please talk to staff offline. And at some point in the future, that will come back to an agenda item where we can talk about that more. Councilmember Sayak?
This is specific, so thank you, Mayor. And this question is to our town attorney. The election code that you cited, so is this specific to Los Gatos, or this is just an election code basically?
It's statewide. Yeah,
It's
so it
statewide.
applies to all cities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I do have a motion and a second and lots of side tangents. At this point, if there's no other comments, I'm going to call the question for the motion that was put on the floor. Councilmember Sayak?
I'm going to vote aye for the motion, but do so just per advice from our town attorney that with the election code cited, what I don't want is I don't want to suspend all of the work that we have to do because we are waiting on an election result. And so for that reason, and those two reasons, I will be voting in support. Thanks.
So that was a question for a yes. I take that as a yes vote. Vice Mayor Risto?
For the same reasons, because I don't want to leave people who are trying to move forward with projects while something was snagged by a bunch of signature gatherers. I'll vote aye.
Councilmember Hudis?
Aye.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye also. And I'll say that, there will be more opportunities to work on this. Again, this was just a quick stopgap. So we'll have future agenda items to take whatever direction the majority of the council would like to do in the future. So with the mayor voting aye, this does pass unanimously. And I believe that is our last agenda item. So unless anybody has anything else, I will call us adjourned. Thank you, council.